Hey guys, welcome to Steve the Painter. I am narrating this one so they don't hear me yapping away. So I'm just going to take you guys through my process painting this area from top to bottom and giving you some tips and tricks along the way. So we got some off-white walls and trim. We got a closet with a little piece of furniture inside. And everything in the closet's getting painted. And this wall here is actually going to be an accent wall. The ceilings go in a much brighter white. We got a little bit of furniture to work around. No big deal, nothing new. We're just going to throw some plastic over that. We got a window frame with some old brackets that need to come out and be filled in. One of the first things I'm going to do is sweep things down. This house does have a little dog, and so I'm going to use this little broom, sweep everything. It's good to get around these. You don't want any junk getting in your roller or brush when you go around those. I just kind of go around starting at the top and work your way down, and then get along the baseboard so you can put your drops down and you don't have anything that's going to get on those baseboards later. Hit everything with the plastic. First thing I'm going to be doing is getting the ceiling ready. That hook's coming out. That old repair needs a little bit of love. And the trim in this unit is oil-based. So there's going to be a little bit of an extra process for that. And the baseboard's oil-based too. Here are these brackets. They need to be repaired. And there's about a nickel-sized hole there. And so before you start spackling the walls, you want to scrape off anything that's not smooth, because that will mess up your spackle coat. And the walls are in pretty good shape. A few nail holes here and there. A few gouges. Not too many nail pops or anything. This is a 20-minute quick set, which I like to use a lot. You just put a little bit of water in there, and you want it to be like peanut butter consistency. That's actually exactly the way you want it. If you put too much water in, it'll shrink too much while it's drying. So this will give you about 15 minutes working time. If you use hot water, it'll give you less. And here's a neat little trick. Instead of keeping it in a bag that shoots dust up everywhere, transfer it to a bucket and use a protein scooper. There you go. And so now I'm just going around, hitting all the little nail holes, all the little gouges. When you pass over these, you want to go in more than one direction. If you go in one direction, the repair won't actually be filled. And there's a little bit of spackle and texture to match that. And the plates need to come off. We're not going to be painting around those. Some holes in the window frame that need to be repaired. Just put a little wood putty in those. And as you can see, I found quite a few blemishes. Not too many, but you can always find something. All right, so now we are ready to start on the ceiling. And I like this roller for the ceiling. It's a 3/4 inch Colossus. It's good to handle the texture. And here's a neat little trick. Instead of wrapping the tape around the roller to get the fibers off, you can actually just roll the roller right on the tape. This is much easier when I'm not filming with the other hand. But if you only have one hand, you just put the tape on a ladder or something. Then you catch the fibers in motion, and they're more likely to come off. Right now, I'm prepping the roller because you want to have this roller pre-dampened. Not wet, but pre-dampened. This really helps load the roller with paint much faster. And you see how I'm encouraging those fibers at the end to kind of hang off the edge of the frame? That's part of a time-saving trick that lets me roll right into that ceiling corner. You can really only get away with that if you're using the right kind of roller and it's prepped the correct way. I wouldn't suggest this though if you're new to painting. You're much better off just brushing that corner. However, when you paint as much as I do, it really is a great technique to save a lot of time. And right now I'm straining the paint because you never know what kind of weird junk could have fallen off the lid. It's always a good idea to just strain it out if you suspect there's something in there. And I had a feeling there was, so that was actually a good idea. That would have ended up on my roller. So now it's a good idea to load the roller and let it sit for about 5 minutes before you even start rolling with it. Just let it sit, it'll fill itself. And while I'm letting that sit, I'm gonna cut in the ceiling around the fan. So it's always good to do that before you move all the furniture to the center. So I left a little nook. Cutting the light actually makes it easier to see what you're doing. And this brush is a 2-inch angle tip Worcester Chinex brush. It's old, but it's been pretty well maintained, so it still cuts pretty good. It's a pretty stiff brush. It lets me get really close to whatever I'm trying to paint without touching it. I worry about getting the line close before I worry about feathering the cut out wide for the roller. And when the ceilings are textured like this, you really have to work the paint back and forth a lot to get on either side of that texture. Otherwise, when you go back to do the second coat, it's actually going to make it harder to cover that texture. So you just kind of back and forth, put it on nice and thick. Not too thick, and so I always brush these corners, even if I'm going to use this little roller trick. The roller's ready to go. And now I'm just kind of leveling down some of the spikiness of that texture, just so it kind of blends in a little better. It was looking a little too pointy. And again, cut the light so you can see what you're doing with less shadow. Natural light is always easier, for me at least. So that quick roll that I did before I got close to the corner, that's really important. Otherwise, you're going to put paint all over the wall. But you see how there's just a tiny bit of paint on the wall, similar to as if I brushed it. So you do the perimeter, and you create this U pattern. And that way you can keep a wet edge. It's always good to keep a wet edge when you're painting. And so you do the perimeter, and then you just go back and forth across the center there in one direction. So there's the first coat. And you can't really see the repairs, which is good. This is Super Paint Flat, which is a good paint for ceilings. It's not typically a ceiling paint, but it works great for ceilings. It really does not spray off the roller at all, especially if you buy a high quality roller. And so while I'm waiting for this first coat on the ceiling to dry down, I'm going to move on to deglossing this trim and sanding all this oil-based trim. And that is what I'm using to degloss it. You want to wear gloves when you use this. You don't want to get that stuff on your hands. This sanding handle works great for applying pressure and sanding corners as well, if you use it correctly. That is 100 grit on there. And then this little sanding sheet is 220. And you can see the corner of that sanding handle lets me shape the spackle to match the framing. Now I'm applying the deglosser. And you're better off applying 2 thinner coats rather than one really thick one, because this stuff will leave a residue that needs to be cleaned off. This is a rinse-free product, but if you put it on too thick, there will be a residue that will interfere with your top coats. All right, now that the trim has been prepped, we're going to get into the first coat of the trim. And this is a nice little trim setup. It's a Purdy cut bucket with a liner and a magnet for the brush, and that little mini microfiber 3/8 inch helps me load the brush. So if you're new to painting, I wouldn't recommend doing what I do. I just freehand everything because I've been painting for 25 years. But as you can see, I just kind of go right above the floor. And it doesn't matter if I get it on the wall because this is just the first coat of trim. And we're going to be doing that second coat after the walls are done. If I were giving advice to a DIYer who doesn't paint a ton, I would say tape this floor off with frog tape. That's going to give you a much better result than the standard blue tape. And this brush I'm using is not my best, but it's good enough to cut above the floor, which is all that matters. It's a Worcester angle tip, firm. I'm partial to the firm brushes. I like to paint these edges before I get into any wall paint. I like to have those done before I paint the walls. And one of the good things about this emerald urethane trim enamel is that if you prep this oil-based trim properly with the deglossing and the 220 grit sandpaper, this stuff will bond. It won't always bond to every oil-based paint, but this particular trim was tested already. I had done some previous painting in this home and I tested the bond of this paint. This paint and the Benjamin Moore Advanced will bond pretty well to properly prepped oil-based. Not every single oil-based paint though. You have to be a little careful. So it's worth testing it out, making sure it's a tenacious bond. I like to get these edges done too, because they're a pain in the butt to do after the wall paint. And the roller's good to get the paint on, and then you can just lay it off with the brush. Lays down nice and smooth. The Benjamin Moore Advance is a really good trim paint as well. It has a much longer open time, so you have to have a lot more patience, but it levels out nice. Zip right around these. We're not taping this stuff. Come on now. We don't got time for that. Or money for that. And then this little edge everyone forgets about. And I kind of have a way of doing these after so many of them, where I get the inside of these top two first, and then I work my way down. If you're using the correct roller technique and the correct roller, you can actually fully cover the inside of those panels without using a brush at all. Even the little corners. You just have to be a little meticulous about it. And then I just move my way down so it keeps a wet edge. Getting the insides first. Usually one roll per panel or invert or whatever you want to call them. And you can see these little mini microfibers, they hold quite a bit of paint. And I try to do the final passes with the roller in the direction of the wood grain for that particular section. And there's the first coat. And the ceiling is dried down by now, ready for its second coat. Second coat done. And I don't know if I've been painting too long or what, but I'm developing a new skill of guessing how much paint to put in the pan exactly to the last roll. So follow along on my various videos and we'll see how many times I can get that right. So now I'm going to paint the inside of this closet. Like I said, I don't have to worry about these anchor holes, which is nice. That item was in the closet, so had to pull that out. So yeah, we got some stuff to work around, but not too bad. The wall's dry by now. So we're just going to go ahead and sand all these patches. And I have a little technique that catches all the sand in my dustpan. So it works great if you have a metal pan. You just press it tight to the wall and sand right above it, and you'll catch pretty much everything. You do have to be a little careful doing it that way, though. Some will get away. But look how much is in there just from that little bit of spackle. This Pro 999 Primer RX35, quite a name it's got. This stuff works great for priming patches before paint. It's basically a primer for porous surfaces. Works good on bare drywall and spackle repairs. And now we're getting into painting the accent color on the doors. This is also urethane trim enamel, but in semi-gloss. The white trim's actually full gloss. I like painting this edge without hitting the wall because that wall's not going green. And that way I can just zip down with the roller and don't have to worry about getting too close to the wall with the roller. All right, now we're jumping into painting the ceiling lines with the wall paint, which is not a huge departure from the current color. It's always good to kind of feather that bottom edge out as you're brushing. You don't want to see a noticeable paint line there. I switched over to my right hand. Sometimes I paint with my right hand, but I'm primarily left-handed. But, you know, it's good to mix it up every now and then. And now that these edges were done earlier, I can just cut right down there and get a nice straight wall line. I always make sure to put 2 coats on those edges before I start the wall cutting. Give a little brush around these. And right here, you only need a few inches out from that frame to get the roller past there. And now you just paint above this baseboard, almost as if you're not painting the trim. But it's okay if you get a little bit on, because you are coming back again for that final trim coat. There's no sense in taking this shelf out in such a small closet, especially when it's so fast to just paint around the brackets. It really doesn't take long at all. So now I'm just giving the walls a good sanding. Normally I'd probably do this with a radial sander on a pole, but in such a small room I'm just doing it by hand. A lot of times you can get a good result just doing it by hand. Alright, so the walls are ready for the roller. This little trick works well when you're about to be away from the brush for a little bit. Just throw a wet rag over top of it and it'll keep it from drying out. So I'm using a microfiber roller. It's a nice plush fabric. Doing the nifty little tape trick again to get the lint off the roller. And look how much it catches. You know you like it. These little upright paint pans with the handles are actually really good for tight spaces. And really good for stairwells. There's a pro tip for you. Normally I would use my medium pole, but in a tight space, I like the smaller one. It's always good to roll floor to ceiling, back rolling a little bit. This paint applies very well. It requires less back rolling. This is actually the Emerald matte finish. If it's Sherwin-Williams, I prefer the Duration and the Emerald. And if it's Benjamin Moore, I prefer the Regal and the Aura. All really good products. Let me know in the comments if I should just shut up or keep rattling off paint tips. These doors are ready for their final coat. So give them a quick sand with the 220. So there's the completed second coat. And here's my freaky skill again of guessing the paint down to the last roll. Happens a lot. So now I'm just laying off the final coat of the baseboards. And I decided to switch to a smaller brush. I prefer this brush when I'm doing something like cabinets. But I like it sometimes when I'm trying to do nice straight lines on something. Even though the bigger brush works, this thing is a little bit sharper. Now I'm just laying off the window one last time. And onto the accent color. It's always good to brush first. Hide all those brush strokes with the roller. And you got to be a little more careful when it's a drastic color difference. But you want to keep up the speed because it keeps the line straighter. The same thing over the baseboards. Trying to act as though, I might not be coming back to paint those again. Even though I am coming back to paint this baseboard again. The other ones are done. It's good to let the brush do a lot of the work. Let the shape of the brush make the corner for you. And that's why it's important to maintain your brushes. And always keep the case that it comes in. And after you clean it, you put it back in that case and it stays good. This ceiling line, or this wall line, was pretty funky. I actually had to move a little slower on this one. There was some unevenness going on. It looked like at one point something was fastened up into that corner. When you do these little corners, a lot of it is just how much paint you have on the brush. You don't want a ton of paint on the sides of the brush. Less is more. This space is actually a little tighter than it looks on the video. You can see I have to actually keep my elbow above that piece of furniture just to roll it floor to ceiling. And the reason why rolling floor to ceiling is nice is because when you look along that wall, you don't want to see overlaps in the middle of the wall. You want to see uniformity. Just going straight down the wall, a nice uniform sheen. Now just doing a quick second coat. The good thing about getting these lines kind of perfect on the first coat is that the second coat can still improve them just slightly. The downside of trying to get them only perfect on the second coat and coming in really close on the first coat is that they're not as straight as they would be if you tried to get them perfect twice. That said, if you're a beginner, I would not paint all the way into that corner. Just paint about 1 millimeter away from it, and then on that second pass, if you're trying to practice freehanding, you try to get it perfect on that second pass. I prefer to spend a little more time on the first coat, and then the second coat I can focus a little more on coverage and just feathering the edges and everything like that. It's a little more fun, that second coat, when the first one's done nice. That sill needed a little more attention, in my opinion, so I just gave it a quick sand. Now just give these walls a quick sand. And then I'm ready to finish it up. Man, this is only my second time filming myself working, and it really slows me up. I have a new appreciation for people that document themselves working. I'd be done so long ago. And boom, look, I did it again. I'm 3 for 3 on this job alone. Not too shabby. Now I'm just laying the trim off with one last coat. And I don't know if you can tell, but that wall is still drying. But I was getting pretty eager to get out of there, so I actually used a heat gun on that bottom edge to speed up the trim. It works. Now I just use this little mini vac and then I'm done. Boom. This was another part of the house that I painted, but I never filmed it, so I figured I'd show it now. Yeah, so if you got some value out of this video, help me out. Like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one.